We are now switching to the English part of the seminar. Hello everyone, from the East, in the China, Shanghai, to the West in America, Seattle and Nevada. I should say good morning, good afternoon, and good night, all together. 15 hours time difference. On behalf of the organizing committee of the seminar, it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome you to the 10th seminar on linear algebra and its application. The seminar will be hosted by the Faculty of Mathematics and Computer and Mahani Mathematical Research Center at Shahid Bahunar, University of Kerman. As a part of the series of biannual held seminar of the Iranian Mathematical Society, this seminar aims to create a friendly discussion atmosphere for researchers in linear algebra and numerical linear algebra. The seminar received 130 submissions. According to discussions by the reviewer, 76 submissions were accepted for publication, 59 as oral presentation, and 17 as posters. We are proud to present a very interesting program. The seminar program includes 10 plenary talks of distinguished mathematicians. Thank you all for accepting our invitation. I should say thanks to the authors for submitting their research papers to this seminar, and also thanks to the members of the scientific committee for their time in reviewing the papers. We are also very thankful to the members of the executive committee for their efforts in the arrangement, promotion, and organization of the seminar. Finally, I should say thanks to all of you for your participation at this seminar. Now, I'm asking the chair of this session, Professor Mehdi Rajabaripur, to introduce the speakers of these sessions. Thank you very much.
Can I be heard now?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Mehdi, for this kind introduction. This is my fourth meeting I am talking in. I was in Kerman, I was in Rafsanjan, I was in Mazandran, and I'm very happy that under difficult circumstances we have organized this meeting. The topic of my talk is averages and means of positive definite matrices.
Professor Bahadia, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think your microphone volume's gone down. Can you try readjust?
Okay, let me try again. Is it better now?
Yes. Can you turn it up?
Yeah, it's the maximum now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
But my screen now is a little less than clear. Okay, now, all right. Can it be seen now?
Yes.
All right. So I just mentioned the topic of my lecture, and I have made it elementary, accessible to students. So let's start with positive numbers, which are observations and measurements in some experiment. So suppose I have two of them. x1 is equal to 3, x2 is equal to 7, and I wish to take an average of those, a mean. So that's x bar, which is x1 plus x2 over 2, which is 5. 3 plus 7 over 2, that's 5. So you can think of this as doing some algebra on the observations. I could also imagine that there are 2 points positioned at 3 and 7 on the real line, and the mean is the midpoint, which is at 5. So you can think of this as doing some kind of geometry to the observations. I can also imagine that there are 2 equal masses hanging at the points 3 and 7, and I put a fulcrum where there is balance, and that fulcrum has to be at 0.5. So you can think of this as doing some kind of mechanics. There is also a statistical way of looking at it. That is, you look at the function x minus x1 whole squared plus x minus x2 whole squared. That is the dispersion, and the minimum of this is at the point x is equal to the average x bar. So these are 4 different ways of looking at a mean of 2 positive numbers, and each suggests a different kind of generalization. So I could have more than 2 points. Then I just add them up and divide by m if I have m points. That's x bar, the mean. Instead of real numbers, I could go to higher dimensional space, R2, R3, or something more. And the mean is now, if you have 3 points, the center of the triangle, that's the center of gravity, or the barycenter, or the centroid, which is the intersection of the 3 medians. I have drawn another picture with 6 points, and again you can see the mean is something at the center. And you see a cluster of data points. Their center is the mean or minimizer of the dispersion. Now, more generally, I could have any space with a distance function d, that is a metric space, but either there is no algebra, or the algebraic operation is something different from plus. For example, if my data points are on the surface of a sphere, then I want a mean also to lie on the sphere, on the surface of the sphere. So this is the notion of the Frechet mean of m points. You take a metric space with metric d, then take the sum of the squared distances of x from those points, divide by 1 over m, and ask for the minimizer of this function. Now you have to be a little careful when you go to general structures. Such a minimizer may not exist. For example, if my space is the disk with a puncture at the center, then the center of gravity should have lied on that center, but that is missing in the space. So the mean candidate does not lie in this space, so it doesn't exist in this space. If it exists, it may not be unique always. So we need some conditions on the metric and on the space X. So for example, if you take the sphere, if I have any 2 points x1 and x2, most of the time there is a geodesic going between them which is unique. So for example, if I was to travel from Delhi to Tehran or to Kerman, I will be going along a geodesic path and there is a midpoint there. But in a special case, when your points are the North Pole and the South Pole, then every point on the equator is a midpoint. So in this case, there is no unique mean. You have a whole continuum of means. So you have to be slightly careful. You have to put conditions on the metric space and you have to put conditions on the metric, typically convexity or something like that. And again, I want to draw your attention to the fact that if I was to take the arithmetic mean, which is 1/2 of x1 plus x2, then I will get a point which is not on the sphere. But our data points are on the sphere, so our mean should also be on the sphere. So that's an interesting problem. Now I will motivate a different point, and these two will join after some time. Very often we are interested in different scales. So for example, if I have positive numbers, then instead of the usual distance mod a minus b, I could take it that the distance between a and b is the modulus of log a minus log b. And for later use, I am pointing out that log a minus log b is also log of a divided by b, which is minus of log b divided by a. So examples where we are interested in this scale is the Richter scale in seismology. When we measure earthquakes, then we use the logarithmic scale. Earthquake of scale at 8 is 10 times as strong as the one at 7. pH values in chemistry, decibel scale in acoustics. Those of you who used old-fashioned cameras may remember there were f-stops. That is a logarithmic scale. In music, octaves. So all these are examples of logarithmic scale. And we might like to use this. One important property of this metric is that the distance between any 2 points, the distance from any point from 0 and infinity, both are infinity. So that is useful when you are looking at a problem where attaining very high values is as difficult as obtaining very low values. So for example, in temperatures, reaching absolute zero is very, very difficult, and reaching very high temperatures is equally different. So we may like to use the logarithmic scale. So just to lighten the mood, here is a quotation from the French philosopher Pascal. What is man in nature? A nothing in comparison with the infinite, and all in comparison with the nothing. And then he says a mean between nothing and everything. So which is the mean he is talking about? If he had in mind the arithmetic mean of 0 and infinity would be infinity. If you take the harmonic mean, it will be 0. It's only the geometric mean here which serves the purpose he has in mind. The geometric mean of 0 and infinity is 1. So if you apply the L'Hopital rule, you will see that you get 1 as the geometric mean of 0 and infinity. So here I have listed for you on the space of positive numbers sum matrix and the corresponding Frechet means. Remember, the Frechet mean was the minimizer of the sum of the distance squared. So if I take the usual metric, modulus of A minus B, then the Frechet mean, that's the minimizer of the dispersion with respect to this metric, turns out to be the usual arithmetic mean. I change the metric. Instead of A minus B, I take the distance between the reciprocals, that is modulus of 1 upon A minus 1 upon B. Then in that metric, the Frechet mean turns out to be the harmonic mean. If I take the distance between the logarithms, then this turns out to be the geometric mean. I take another monotone function, I take a to the power t minus b to the power t, and I take this as my metric, and then I look at the Frechet mean, then it turns out to be what is called the power mean. So if t was equal to 2, this is the root mean square, which is often used by electrical engineers. So you can try your favorite metric and see what mean you get on numbers. So this is very interesting. What we were familiar with as the three means, arithmetic, harmonic, and geometric, they turn out to be Frechet means with respect to different metrics. All right, now these two will come together, the Frechet mean and different metrics, in the space I am interested in today's lecture, that is positive definite matrices. Their set, their collection will be denoted by P. This is an open subset of Hermitian matrices. So look at n cross n real or complex Hermitian matrices with the condition that the inner product between x and ax is positive for all vectors x. Such a matrix is said to be positive semi-definite if the inequality is strict for all non-zero vectors. Then we say the matrix is positive definite. So there are equivalent conditions, many of them. One of them is that A is Hermitian and all the eigenvalues of A are positive. Another is A is a Gram matrix or a correlation matrix. You have n vectors somewhere, u1, u2, un. Take the matrix whose ijth entry is the inner product between ui and uj. Then the matrix is positive definite. These are correlation matrices. You have observations, vector valued observations, u1, u2, un. The correlation between them is ui, comma, uj. And that's the matrix entry Aij. So a matrix is positive definite if and only if it's a correlation matrix or a Gram matrix. So positive definite matrices are non-commutative analogues of positive numbers. These are important in various problems. Here is a list of some of them. In statistics, you have correlation matrices. I just talked about them. In mechanics, you have stiffness matrices. In fluid flow, diffusion matrices. In quantum mechanics and quantum information theory, density matrices. Density matrices are positive definite matrices whose trace is equal to 1. So that's the analog of probability vectors, positive numbers adding up to 1. Then there are covariance matrices, kernels in machine learning, Hessians in convex analysis. The talk following mine by Professor Overton will talk about Hessians, I guess. All of these are positive definite matrices, so they are important. Here are some elementary facts about positive definite matrices that I will use in the lecture. If A and B are positive definite, then so is their sum A plus B. If I multiply a positive definite matrix by a positive number, then the resulting matrix alpha A is also positive definite. So these form a cone, and if they are positive definite, an open cone. If A and B are positive definite, then their product in general is not positive definite. It will be so if and only if A and B commute. In fact, the product is not even Hermitian unless the matrices commute. If you have a positive definite matrix and take any other matrix X, then X star AX is also positive definite. If you take X to be non-singular, then such a transformation, A going to X star AX, is said to be a congruence. The last point to see here is extremely interesting. If I have a matrix A bigger than B, what does that mean? That means A minus B is positive definite. Then you might expect that if I raise A to any power t, then A to the power t will be bigger than B to the power t. Surprisingly, that is not true. This is true if and only if t is between 0 and 1. So I repeat, if A is bigger than B, by which we mean A minus B is positive definite, then there are elementary examples which will show you that A square need not necessarily be bigger than B square. But the square root of A is always bigger than the square root of B. So for all powers t between 0 and 1, you have the property that the order is preserved, but if t is bigger than 1, that is no longer true. So this is the beginning of a deep theory due to Loebner. What are functions that preserve order? So this point will be important in my talk, that functions which preserve the matrix order given by positivity are said to be matrix monotone functions or operator monotone functions. And it turns out that if you take the powers, then only the powers between 0 and 1 are matrix monotone. In the same way, the exponential function is not monotone, but the logarithmic function is. So there is a theory which characterizes which functions are monotone. So remember this, the logarithmic function is monotone, but the exponential function is not monotone in this sense of positivity of matrices. So let's return to our problem of means. I have two positive definite matrices, and I want to imitate what we do for numbers and define various means. Arithmetic mean, no problem, just take A plus B over 2. I just observed that if A and B are positive definite, then so is A plus B, and therefore so is A plus B over 2. If I want to define harmonic mean, I take A inverse plus B inverse over 2 and take the inverse. Again, no problem. If A is positive definite, so is A inverse. So you get a positive definite matrix. But if I try to formulate a notion of a geometric mean, then the obvious doesn't work anymore. We noticed that if A and B are positive definite, then their product AB need not be positive definite. So square root of A times square root of B does not make sense, nor does square root of AB, because AB is not positive definite. So one has to wonder, just as curiosity may be, what is a good matrix version of square root of A? Now what do I mean by good? It should have good theoretical properties. And remember, there are applications which we are interested in, some in mathematics, some in engineering, physics, etc. So it should have the right applications, it should meet some of the demands which people in those subjects make. So I'll give you an example. So in medical imaging, for example, when you image the brain, you take scans, then typically they will inject some dye and chase it, how it spreads, and you get the diffusivity matrix.
I apologize for interrupting again. Your voice seems to hit on your low. Can you try adjusting your
Yours
microphone?
is also unclear, so I don't know what I can do. I can bring this closer to me. Is this better? Is this?
Yes,
It's better? Okay,
right
so I've just brought it a little closer to the iPad. So I was saying that in medical imaging, you have a matrix which is how a fluid is diffusing in the brain tissue, and the determinant of that matrix is the volume of water in the tissue. We were all taught that determinants have some kind of volume, determinants are some kind of volume, so you can believe that. And if you take one scan or one picture, it doesn't give you the complete information. So you have to take several of them, and then you want to average the information. So look at this 2 by 2 example which I'm showing you. Take the matrix A, which is 2, 1, 1, 1, and B, which is 1, 1, 1, 2. Both have determinant 1. But if you take the usual arithmetic mean, A plus B over 2, you see that the determinant is now 5 over 4. Now that is bigger than both the determinant of A and determinant of B. So if the MRI people, they are inferring that the determinant represents the volume of water in a tissue, and they average the information they are getting from 2 different scans, then now they see what they call the swelling phenomenon. They infer a swelling in the tissue which is not there. They took 2 scans, and the determinant in each case would have been 1, and they average the information and they're getting something bigger than 1. So they demand that give us a mean, where mean of 2 positive definite matrices, where the determinant is also a mean of the determinants. May not be arithmetic mean, but it should be in between the 2. So that's a requirement imposed on what should be called a mean, that it should average the determinants. Okay, now I'm listing some reasonable conditions for a mean. On the left hand side, you see the properties for means of positive numbers. On the right hand side, you see the corresponding properties for means of matrices. So A and B are 2 positive numbers. I want a mean. First property, it should be symmetric in the 2 variables. That's reasonable. Exactly the same for matrices. I have 2 matrices. The mean should be symmetric in the 2 variables. Property number 2, the mean should be between the minimum and the maximum. Because it's a mean, it's an average, it should lie in between. Now for matrices, I have no minimum or maximum. So I have to already worry what's the good replacement for this condition. And the condition I put is if A is less than or equal to B. Remember that meant B minus A is positive semi-definite. Then the mean should be between A and B. But it's not necessary that if I give you 2 matrices, one should be smaller than the other. Property number 3, if I multiply both by numbers A and B by the same positive number alpha, then the mean should also be multiplied by the same number. So this is homogeneity. Matrices are more interesting. So instead of multiplying by a number, I do X star AX to both the matrices. So remember, we told you that if A is positive definite, then so is X star AX. Then the same thing should happen to the mean. The mean of X star AX and X star BX should be X star MABX. So this is called congruence invariance. It comes from, again, electrical systems. It's called the transformer equation there. So that's property number 3. fourth property, if you increase one of your arguments, then mean should also increase. Mean should be monotone in both the variables. So same thing I demand for my matrix mean, but as I already told you, this condition is tricky. For numbers, if a is less than or equal to a prime, then a square is less than or equal to a prime squared. For matrices, that is not true. So this is a source of problem. Then you could have other conditions. Concavity, if you mix two things, then the mean should behave in a certain way. Continuity. So you can put similar conditions on the matrix mean. So that's what I would like a mean. So I said it should have good properties. So these are desirable properties a mean should have. Now if I was to call something a geometric mean, it should have some more properties. So if A and B are diagonal matrices, or if A and B are commuting matrices, then the geometric mean should be just the square root of AB. Then the geometric mean should satisfy the inequality that it lies between the harmonic mean and the arithmetic mean. That's reasonable to expect. If I take the geometric mean of the inverse of A and the inverse of B, then it should be the inverse of the geometric mean of AB. Fourth property, determinant of geometric mean should be the geometric mean of the determinants. So these are some reasonable properties. You can think of more which you would like your mean to have. It depends on what you are trying to do with it. So the solution to this problem, a good geometric mean satisfying all these conditions, was found in 1975 approximately by Pusch and Voronovich doing mathematical physics, what they called purification of states, purification map in C-star algebras. So they came across, or they introduced this notion which you see here, the definition A sharp B given by the formula on the right. Looks very strange, looks mysterious, but it's not so if you start thinking about it. So first of all, notice if A and B were to commute, it will just become square root of AB. Then notice that the middle term, first of all, A to the power minus half, B A to the power minus half, that is a positive definite matrix, so it has a positive definite square root, and then I am multiplying again on the left and the right by A to the power 1/2, so it is a positive definite matrix. What is not immediately clear that it's symmetric in A and B, but it turns out that it is. Now that needs checking. You can just check that A sharp B and B sharp A are the same. Electrical engineers introduced a different notion. They said, look at the Riccati equation as it is called. X times A inverse X is equal to B. Now notice that if these were numbers or commuting matrices, then this equation will just become X square is equal to AB, and the solution is just square root of AB. But we are not in numbers, so you have to do a little more complicated thing, but you can see that it's a generalization of geometric mean of numbers. Now again, somewhat miraculously, the two formulas which you see here, the one in the top line and the solution of this equation, are the same. So these were used very effectively in operator theory, in mathematical physics, in electrical engineering, statistics, elsewhere, lots of papers. And the problem for many years had been how to extend this notion, this idea, to get a good definition of the geometric mean of M matrices where M is bigger than 2. So look at the two formulas above. If you try to imagine what it would be for A, B, C, it seems quite messy, and it is. It doesn't lead to anything good. So the problem is how to extend, how to get a good geometric mean of M matrices. Many people tried. and ultimately it was resolved about 15 years ago through a connection with Riemannian geometry. So recall a little while ago I was talking of the logarithmic scale. The distance between two positive numbers a and b I took at log a minus log b, which is also modulus of log b divided by a. So if I try to imitate this on the space of positive definite matrices, I have two options. I can take delta, distance between a and b, to be the norm of log a minus log b, where the norm is the usual Euclidean norm. So that's good, it gives me a metric. Remember, every positive definite matrix, because it has positive eigenvalues, it has a unique positive logarithm. It's just like numbers. Now that is good, but not so interesting. But if I follow the second way of looking at log of a minus log b, that is, it's also log of b over a, then I can introduce a different version. I take log of a to the power minus half b a to the power minus half. Why am I doing it that way? Because I need a positive definite matrix to take a logarithm. So a inverse b is not positive definite, but a to the power minus half b a to the power minus 1/2 is. So it has a positive definite log, and I am taking the norm of that operator. And this is very interesting. It's not the same thing as log a minus log b anymore. And this opens up very good things. So let me show you that. All right, so let me skip this. So it opens up connections between matrix analysis, Riemannian geometry, and it has lots of applications. So what is Riemannian geometry? So I have a smooth manifold. So imagine, for example, the surface of a sphere. So in this picture, the black part you are seeing is a smooth surface. Take any point small m in that set and look at the tangent space. The tangent space is the best linear approximation to the manifold capital M at the point M. So for example, if you have the globe, then this is the plane touching the globe. So that's the tangent space. At each point of the manifold, I give an inner product between two vectors x and y in that tangent space. This inner product changes from point to point. So that's important. So on each tangent space, I am giving an inner product, and this inner product varies smoothly with the point M. So such a thing is called a Riemannian metric. This is taught in differential geometry courses. And in geometry books, they just give you this and say, okay, this is the Riemannian metric. We want a formula for the distance. Now, given such a metric, I can compute the length of a curve in the manifold M by looking at the tangent vectors. Okay, so this I have tried to illustrate what the manifold of positive definite matrices looks like in 2 dimensions. In higher dimensions, it's more complicated. All right, so if I take the Hermitian matrices, the usual Euclidean inner product between x and y is the trace of xy, and the associated norm is the Euclidean norm. That's the square root of trace x square, and it's the Euclidean norm. I mentioned earlier that positive definite matrices are an open cone in Hermitian matrices. So the tangent space at any point A is the set of all Hermitian matrices. I give an inner product now depending on A, and instead of taking trace xy, this is trace A inverse x, A inverse y. So you have to verify this is an inner product. That's quite easy. The classical version is the famous Rao-Fisher metric in probability. Let's not go to that. Now you take a curve gamma. So a curve is just a continuous map from the interval 0, 1 into the space, which in this case is positive definite matrices. look at the tangent vector gamma prime t, that will be in the tangent space, and I gave a distance in each tangent space which varied from point to point. So the length of this curve gamma is the integral of the length of the tangent vectors, that is norm of gamma prime t, but that norm is varying from point to point. So this is the length of gamma. Now you take any 2 points A, B, there may be several curves joining those in this space. You take the one of minimal length, gamma naught, and the length of that I call delta AB. So that gives a distance, actually metric in the sense of metric space on the manifold P. So let me repeat. I take any 2 points A, B, I look at all paths which join them, and I look for one which is of minimal length. This doesn't always exist, but in this case it exists. You have to prove that, and that length I am calling delta AB. Now it turns out that this delta AB is exactly the logarithmic distance which I introduced. You could take log of A minus half B A minus half, take the 2 norm, this is that distance delta AB. So you can think of this as a generalization of the logarithmic distance, which as we noticed is important even for numbers, and the metric, Riemannian metric, also leads to this same distance. So this gives a very interesting connection now with Riemannian geometry. Now there are 2 or 3 important properties. One of them is this distance is invariant under congruence transformations. If I take x star AX, x star BX, and take the distance between them, it doesn't change. The distance between A inverse and B inverse is also the distance between A and B. Just as log of A over B is the same thing as log of B over A in modulus. So you can invert and the distance doesn't change. There are other properties which are like exponential metric increasing property, which shows that this manifold is of negative curvature. Probably I need not to get into that, but nevertheless it's here. So on the left hand side you see a picture, symbolic picture. It's a vector space of Hermitian matrices. On the right hand side you see a cone, the cone of positive definite matrices, and there is the exponential map between them. Exponential of a Hermitian matrix is positive definite, and the reverse map is the logarithm. Take any 2 points H and K, and in the vector space you have a straight line joining them. Under the exponential map it becomes a curved line. That's the geodesic joining exponential H and exponential K. The fundamental inequality is that the distance on the right hand side in the Riemannian metric is bigger than the distance between H and K in the Euclidean metric. So that is geodesics on the right hand side spread out faster than the straight lines. So this is a typical property of manifolds of negative curvature. If you have a manifold of positive curvature like the globe, then the great circles tend to come to closer to each other than the tangents. So this property is important. All right, now this is something which geometry books normally do not do. But if you are doing analysis or matrix analysis, you feel more comfortable with equations and inequalities. So I want to know explicitly the equation of the geodesic joining 2 points A and B. And that's what you see above. If you try to write out that equation, which I will not, I'll just tell you what it is. Then the equation is given by what you see there. A to the power 1/2 times tth power of A to the power minus half dA to the power minus half, and again A to the power 1/2. So notice, if t is equal to 0, you are at A. If t is equal to 1, you are at B. And in between, you are tracing out this geodesic. Now a miracle happens that the geometric mean, that funny formula which you saw, is just the midpoint of this geodesic. So that's a geometric mean in a very profound way. It is geometric in the sense of this Riemannian geometry. It's the midpoint. And that suggests what I should do for more than two variables. I should look for the Frechet mean with respect to this metric. So if I'm given m points a1, a2, am, the Riemannian mean is the unique solution of the least squares problem. Remember, I said in a metric space, you can define a mean by looking at that point x which minimizes the sum of squares of the distance from x to aj. Now I have the metric space P with this Riemannian metric which I have been talking about. Look at that sum of squares of the distance and ask for a minimizer. Now it needs proof that there exists a minimizer and it is unique. So that you have to believe. And in fact, this is classical. This was done by the great mathematician Cartan, though not in this context, in some other context. And we can give simple matrix theoretic proofs. So having proved that there is a unique simple matrix theoretic proofs. So having proved that there is a unique minimizer, I introduce that as the definition of the geometric mean of A1, A2, Am. Now, of course, it should have the right properties. I listed down 5 or 6, and it should have applications. Now, for two matrices, I also gave you an explicit formula, which you saw. Here, there is no explicit formula. So we try to look for other characterizations. So it turns out that this minimizer x is the solution of a good, interesting matrix equation, which you see here. Take logarithm of x to the power minus half, aj x to the power minus half, sum over j, then this equation has a unique solution, and that is the minimizer. So this was introduced in a paper by me and Holbrook, and a little earlier in a paper by Moacher, roughly appearing at the same time, 2004-2005. So that's the definition of the geometric mean. I repeat, it's the Frechet mean with respect to this metric which is coming from Riemannian geometry. You can think of it as a generalization of the logarithmic distance, but it is more complicated because we are in higher dimensional spaces with multiplication, non-commutative, and so on. And for two variables, it reduces to what was introduced in 1975 by Pusch and Voronovich. Okay, now many questions arise. Now there, as I said, that we wrote down 5 or 6 or 10 properties which a mean should have. It should satisfy the right properties. It should be between the harmonic mean and the arithmetic mean. It should be monotone in the variables. Its determinant should be the geometric mean of the determinants. Now these questions typically are not studied in differential geometry. But since they are studied in matrix analysis, we had to prove that this mean has all those properties. This led to new results in geometry because you want to see how to compute this object. So in numerical analysis, approximation, you have to write down formula, you have to write algorithms and MATLAB programs for computing this. And somewhat miraculously, very quickly, it was adopted by engineers and people working in image processing because it solved many problems about those fields: diffusion, tensor imaging, smoothing of radar data, etc. The crux of the matter is that correlation matrices are positive definite. So typically when you are studying a radar image, you throw beams on some object, then they are reflected back, and the information you are getting is because you are looking at the reflections coming from 1,000 different points and correlate them. Otherwise, from a single photograph, you don't get too much information. And those matrices are positive definite, and smoothing of data means averaging. And for averaging, you need a mean. Okay, now I will tell you about another metric and another mean. So the ideas developed in studying the first metric which we have been talking about have turned out to be useful in related problems because the same questions arise. So here is a problem coming from the area of optimal transport. So that's an economic problem. I want to carry material from one spot to another, minimizing the cost. So you have mines and you have factories. You want to carry coal from a mine to the factory in the least cost. So mathematically it is this problem. So think of one distribution of matter in the plane. So let's say furniture in the room you are sitting in. So that's a measure or probability distribution of material lying there, and you want to shift it to another distribution. So think of two probability measures, let's say in RD, in Euclidean space, and gamma is a probability distribution in the product space, RD cross RD, whose marginals, which means whose projections are mu and nu. And the problem is to solve this minimization problem. Cxy is what is called the cost function. It's the cost of moving a unit mass, a unit of material from the point x to y. And you have to minimize that. So let me repeat. I have two probability distributions, let's say on R3. Imagine them as the distribution of material mass. Then I lift it up, take it up, and bring it back to some other distribution. So that's a product measure whose marginals are mu and nu. And this is the cost function which you see, Cxy integrated, and I have to minimize this. So typically, this Cxy is the square of the norm of x minus y. And you can prove that you have to put some conditions on the measures that this has a unique solution. That is called dw mu nu. That's a metric on the space of measures. It's called Wasserstein distance, Kantorovich-Rubinstein metric. So very important area, one Nobel Prize for Kantorovich for this problem, one Fields Medal for Villani for studying these problems of optimal transport. What has it got to do with matrices? Very special case is Gaussian distributions. So let me try to explain roughly what that is. I have two vectors x and y, random n vectors, so vectors of size n and random. X is distributed, normal distribution with covariance matrix A. And y is distributed, normal distribution with covariance matrix B. What do I mean by that? Remember I said the inner product between xi and xj. So that's expectation of xi times xj. That is the matrix with entries aij. Same for B. So I repeat, I have two vectors x and y distributed with respect to normal distribution with covariance matrices A and B. That is, A is the matrix expectation of xi xj, B is the matrix expectation of y yj. The problem is to minimize the expectation of norm x minus y squared with this constraint that x is distributed according to matrix A and y according to B. So x has covariance matrix A, y has covariance matrix B. With this restriction, minimize the expectation of norm squared of x minus y. It's the problem I wrote earlier, that Kantorovich-Rubinstein optimal transport problem in this special Gaussian case. It turns out that the minimum value is dAB squared, the minimum of that expectation, where dAB looks like what you see here. Trace of A plus B over 2, minus trace of square root of a half b a half. Again, you will notice that a plus b over 2 is arithmetic mean, and the square root of a half b a half is some kind of geometric mean. And this distance is the square root of the difference between the traces. So that you have to prove now. It's not clear that this is a metric, but you can prove it's a metric, and it's the solution of that optimal transport problem. And this is called the Buer's distance in quantum information, Weissenstein metric in optimal transport. We can study it in the same way as we studied the earlier metric. This has also a Riemannian structure. It's more complicated. It's not as simple. Here the curvature is positive, and it's that exponential metric increasing property is not valid. It has fewer symmetries. So it's a more complicated metric, but it can be studied in the same way. And again, there is a surprising connection between the two, and that is the following. I told you the problem is I want to shift material from point X to point Y in the minimal cost. If I can solve that problem, that's called the optimal transport plan. So Tx is the place to which material from X should be taken to minimize the cost. And the answer turns out to be T must be the geometric mean of A inverse and D. So the geometric mean which we were talking about has an application in this optimal transport problem also. And again, the same thing, we can study what's the mean with respect to this metric, what are the geodesics, what is the barycenter, and multi-marginal transport problem, the same problem, not in 2 variables, but in m variables. So all that has been studied. I hope you enjoyed this, and here is where I end. What did it all mean to you? Thank you. Thanks, I've finished. Ali, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it all went
much,
well. I could see it here.
Sure, and
it's fine.
yes, we will now turn to Professor Rajab Alipoor.
So you could remove these slides now, so that there can be questions if people have them. Hello, I can't hear anything. Is it? Hello? Yes, but I can't hear anything if Professor Rajab Alipoor is there or talking. I have my webcam on.
Can't hear you.
You can hear me?
Your microphone is disabled.
No, it's on.
Your microphone is disabled. Please.
Whom are you? My
Open your
microphone or
microphone.
Mehdi's? Oh,
No, Mehdi.
Hello, I can hear you, but not too well. Yeah, please. You see, yes, I heard you. Uh, Now you need to have, you see, just as for numbers, I think, you cannot define a good geometric mean of, let's say, complex numbers or even real numbers. You need a square root. So that is why it's natural to define it for positive definite matrices. So that's my answer, that you need to have a good notion of square root. So wherever you have square root, you can think of it. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope. Yes. Yes. Like uh, complete positive. I understand you mean completely positive maps, right? On C-star algebras, or is that your question, or you talking of entry-wise positivity? I cannot see anything being typed here. I see a blank board, so you will have to read it out to me. No, I can't see anything. It is it. Sorry, say it again. I can't see anything here. I just have a black. Yeah. Now those. Yeah, now you will have to think for your own problem that some means can be defined always. As I said, whenever you have a metric, natural metric, you can define a mean. Geometric mean in particular is intimately tied to, if you are imitating square root of AB, the square root has to preserve that class. So if you are looking at total positivity, by which I understand that all the minors are positive, now that's much harder, much more complicated. Then you have to see if you take square root in what sense. Entry-wise square root. So all the entries are positive, you can take entry-wise square root and see what happens. It's a more complicated structure because it's tied down to two things. One is the metric and the other is the question of square root. So I'm emphasizing again, geometric mean you will understand in the sense of square roots, or as I said here in the second metric, you have some Riemannian structure and you take the geometry introduced by that and take the midpoint or the barycenter. So that's also fine. Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to think of that. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So you have states, and you can you have quantum states, and you want to do various things to them. Averaging will occur in many problems, and again it depends on the problem. So you have data, and you want to average the data. Now in some problems you will take the arithmetic mean and it's good enough. So as I told you, the Post-Voronovich paper to begin with was in mathematical physics. At that time quantum information was not there. They were looking at something else. But it was not a problem coming from quantum. It was called purification of states. So the first paper itself dealt with problems coming from quantum, though not quantum information.
And Dr. Musri is typing another. He said, I think I read it. No, would you please give me some information about the application of matrix means in QIT, for example? No, I read it. I read it. Yes. So it seems that I have no more questions from the audience.
Professor